Slavery, what it does. Wobble on it, wobble, wobble.
Connect to the culture.
Baby, show me that wobble on it, wobble up.
Go I want, good. Whatever you want, it's cool. I'm your CEO, sure. Yeah.
Wobble up.
24/7.
Wobble up.
Tell me how you want it.
Star 927.
Have you checked out the Island Heritage Insurance website? They have upgraded their online payment options to make it easier for you to get a quote, make a claim, and renew your policy. Log on to islandheritageinsurance.com. Island Heritage Insurance is also here for you this hurricane season with helpful tips from their hurricane handbook. Just log on to islandheritageinsurance.com/hurricane.
We understand that things are different, and we are committed to providing you with the service that you need with convenience through our MyCUC online portal. Working remotely and students being home from school doesn't have to mean higher electricity bills. Monitor and manage your energy consumption by using our Customer Connect energy management tool. This allows you to track and make adjustments to your energy usage to avoid consuming high amounts of electricity and keep your electricity bill lower. Protect your health and the health of others by avoiding crowds and using PowerPay. Manage payments for accounts from wherever you are most comfortable. If you're not signed up for MyCUC as yet, it's quick and easy. Just contact our customer service team at service@cuc.ky or 949-5200 today. Remember, we're all in this together, and you've got the power to make a difference.
Flow is excited to bring you everything you'll ever need in a mobile plan. Be the superhero in your family and get the new mobile family plan. The family plan gives you up to 4 lines for $60 per line per month with unlimited talk and data. You heard right, unlimited talk and data. Don't miss out on getting your family plan with Flow today. Visit discoverflow.ky/family for details. Follow us on Facebook and Instagram at Flow Cayman Islands. Terms and conditions apply. Flow, you deserve the best.
Live from Star 927 Studios in the center of Cayman's capital city, Georgetown. This is Straight Talk with Ruth Anna.
Good evening, everybody. You are tuned into Straight Talk, brought to you exclusively by Star 92.7 Premium Radio. I am your host, Ruth Anna Young. Always honored to be your host here on Straight Talk every Monday to Thursday from 5 to 6 p.m. right here and nowhere else other than Star 92.7. It is 5:04 on the Star 92.7 clock, and it is the 13th of August, Thursday the 13th of August, which brings me today to the final day of my Straight Talk week. I'm looking forward to my conversation this afternoon with Mr. Bilika Samamba, known to many in the community, certainly a very educated voice on many of the topics that we are discussing right now. He's joining me this afternoon. I think for the first time here on Straight Talk, we are going to talk about, of course, the currently gazetted domestic partnership bill, the journey that has been through, along with, if we get some time, potentially having a bit of a discussion around independence and what that is and what that could look like, as well as the special powers of the governor. So lots of questions I know that are floating around in the community right now. So we will get to talk to him and seek his counsel and opinion on these matters this afternoon. And I believe it's his first time with me. So we will have a wee mama segment. 943-3700 is the line in studio. And of course, you can also WhatsApp me at 324-1565, or you can email me at straighttalkci@gmail.com. But you guys know the deal. Before we get started, we always start our time with the reading of today's Daily Bread. So today's Daily Bread is entitled A Great Work, and the scripture comes from Nehemiah 6 verse 3, and reads, I am carrying on a great project and cannot go down. Why should the work stop while I leave it and go down to you? The security guard found and removed a piece of tape that was keeping the door from clicking shut. Later, when he checked the door, he found it taped again. He called the police, who arrived and arrested 5 burglars. Working at the Watergate building in Washington, D.C., the headquarters of a major political party in the U.S., the young guard had just uncovered the biggest political scandal of his lifetime simply by taking his job seriously and doing it well. Nehemiah began rebuilding the wall around Jerusalem, a task he took very seriously. Toward the end of the project, neighboring rivals asked him to meet with them in a nearby village. Under the guise of a friendly invitation, but an insidious trap, Yet Nehemiah's response shows the depth of his conviction. I am carrying on a great project and I cannot go down. Why should the work stop while I leave it and go down to you? Although he certainly possessed some authority, he may not have rated very high on the hero scale. He wasn't a great warrior, not a poet or a prophet, not a king or a sage. He was a cupbearer turned contractor, yet he believed he was doing something vital for God. May we take seriously what he's given us to do and do it well in his power and provision. Thanks be to God for that word today. As always, from Straight Talk, we remind you, we encourage you to spend time with each and every day, focus on his word, meditating on his grace, and how awesome he is. With that, I invite for the very first time Mr. Samapa into the conversation here on Straight Talk. And I don't know if you know, but anytime it's your first time here on Straight Talk, I have a special segment called Who Your Mama Is. Right? Just a few minutes, a few minutes to just share with the audience a little bit about yourself, who you are, some of the resume stuff, some of the non-resume stuff, if you would be so kind. So the audience is dying to know who your mama is.
Well, thanks very much, Ruthana. Good evening to you. Good evening to your esteemed listeners. You are an institution in the evening talk show in the islands, in addition to other things that you do.
Thank you.
I hope that we'll have a useful conversation and like really respond to some of what your listeners have been calling in about and are concerned about. Well, it's always very embarrassing to talk about yourself. I am of course an attorney at law. For much of my career, I drafted legislation, specifically in the Cayman Islands. I worked for 12 years as a legislative counsel in the Attorney General's office. So a lot of the legislation that is implemented in the Cayman Islands, freedom of information, public service management, process of crime, a lot of legislation I drafted over 12 years. I mean, my background, I enjoy teaching. Right now, I teach online at the university in Canada. I teach online. I teach lawyers actually how to write laws. So like I really get into the interpretation of the laws as well. I've been a prosecutor before. I've worked in an international organization as a legal officer and done a lot of other little things like that. And I also love to write. But lately, I like to discuss things with people, come on a show and then see what I can contribute to the community. I think that should be enough for now, just to get acquainted.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing. And your resume is long, which often, is often why you get called on in the midst of these conversations. Because many of us who may not come from such a background, you walk away from incidents like the last few weeks in the Cayman Islands wondering, what does this all mean? What were the options? And in this particular case, questions such as, does the governor really have the ability to assent to a bill and turn it into law, even though it was defeated in the Legislative Assembly? So there are lots of questions that people would like to understand, and so we turn to someone like you. Right, I do remember hearing you on one of the other talk shows prior to the debates on this bill in the Legislative Assembly, and around that time, basically, offering your service. I think you referred to it as a group of you were willing to help consult and put forward other options that we could examine, which is part of the conversation I want to have this afternoon as well. But I would like to start kind of with the basics, right? Now, one of the things that we are hearing as a community is okay, this is something we have to do, right? For a variety of reasons, in terms of passing some legislation that gives same-sex couples equal rights and opportunities within the law. But there's debate from some in some quarters that it may not be something we have to do, right? So I want to first ask your opinion. If you could, what is your take on that? Is this something that, based on everything you know surrounding this, is this something that we have to do as a country? Is this something we have to look at? Now, I have my opinion, which I'll share, but certainly would like your take on it.
Yes. before I get into the middle of it, let me just say two things, Ruthana, just to explain. This
Sure.
is a very, very controversial subject. There are some who oppose gay marriage, others don't, others are in the middle. As
Mhm.
for me, my personal position is that I don't oppose gay marriage. I don't support it in the sense that I wouldn't march for it, I wouldn't march against it.
Mhm.
I take the position rather that the community must move together in finding a solution. And one
Mhm.
of the first things I can say in that context is at the moment, the community is not moving together. The community is being forced to do something which might leave upheaval in the community. The
Mhm.
second thing is that I do not think that for those people who oppose either gay marriage or any kind of civil union, I don't think
Mhm.
that they should be classified as haters. In particular, those people who believe that because they believe in the Bible, they are Christians, and it is
Mhm.
very clear in the Bible that homosexuality is more than frowned upon. It is one of the greatest sins. It is the reason why God destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah.
Mhm.
And there are a lot of verses in the Bible which talk about you shall not lie with another man, and so on and so forth. There
Mhm.
are those who take those literally. It is their belief, they are entitled to it. And when
Mhm.
they say that this should not be allowed, I don't think that we should be called them haters. I was listening to one of the pastors on one of the other shows was saying that if you are calling us, that is the pastors, haters, aren't you
Mhm.
also haters for saying, calling us haters for holding our opinion and our beliefs, which is also a freedom of religion? And so
Mhm.
I think that no side here is hating it. What we should try to do is understand that we come from different ends of the spectrum and we should try to find a
Mhm.
solution. Now,
Very,
as to your
very,
question,
very. I think that is a sound platform from which to have this discussion. I appreciate that because I myself, I quite like to discuss the solution at the end of the day, and I do think that issues like this that can be so divisive and it can be difficult to bring people together, but it is something that is necessary if we are going to actually be able to move forward with any type of cohesion, as you mentioned. But continue.
that is so. Yeah, certainly. As to whether we need to do this, as a lot of people, your listeners will be aware, and you will be aware, of course, the the Constitution of the Cayman Islands, Section 14, makes it very clear that heterosexual marriage, marriage between people of the opposite sex, is what the Constitution protects.
Mhm.
There was an attempt by the Chief Justice in his ruling to give doubt to that, but the Court of
Mhm.
Appeal very quickly said, well, look, it is very clear that gay marriage is not permitted and it is not allowed under the Constitution of the Cayman Islands. So that has been made very, very clear. But
Mhm.
more than that, a lot of people have been citing cases from the European Court on Human Rights,
Mhm.
which have said that cases of Oliari, Charpentier, and other cases, which have made it clear that even under the European Convention on Human Rights, marriage between people of the same sex is not a human right which is protected under the European Convention.
Mhm.
And certainly it is not protected under the Cayman Islands Constitution. What
Mhm.
is protected is the right to a private and family life under both the Constitution and the European Convention.
Mhm.
Now, both the European courts and the European Court of Human Rights have interpreted that to mean that it means that you have to be able to give same sex couples a civil union of some kind. Now, there is a little bit of a debate regarding what kind of union it should be, but we'll get into that a little bit later because it was also dealt with by the Court of Appeal. But basically, it is a fundamental human right to have some form of union. So what the governor
Mhm.
is saying, well, look, the Legislative Assembly did not pass the bill. We have an obligation, precisely because of the things that I've mentioned, to ensure
Mhm.
that same-sex couples have got some form of union. And since we have reached a deadlock, I will now use my powers under Section 81 of the
Mhm.
Constitution and Section 55 of the Constitution to bring this same-sex partnership law into effect. So in terms of the obligation is there. Now, in a lot of the discussions I've been having with people over the last few weeks, we have discussed the Section 125 of the Constitution, which talks about the general power that the UK has to make laws for the peace, order, and good government of the Cayman Islands, which basically says you can have your legislative assembly, you can do all those things that you want to do to govern yourself, but whenever we want to, whenever it suits us, we can override all that. Now, that can also be done under Section 81. Now, one of the issues which have arisen is that, well, under Section 81, the governor can of course put together a bill and enact it. But some people have said, oh, but he can only do so if that is a thing which comes in under Section 55. You see, under Section 55 of the Constitution, that's the special powers of the governor.
Yes.
It covers internal affairs as well as external affairs. Now, the point I've tried to make to people is, look, the issue about us in Cayman having to comply with the European standards is a matter of external relations, because it is an obligation that the UK has to implement those things that it has in terms of these international obligations. So there can be no argument really to say, oh, but you see, it doesn't come under 55. It comes under 55 because 55 covers external affairs, and this, the UK is saying, is an international obligation it has, so the governor can use it. It's within those special powers. So I doubt, it's always difficult to predict court decisions. I doubt that any challenge to those powers can ever be successful. But that's where we are regarding that. Now, regarding how, like, the extent of that obligation, I have just said that there is an obligation to allow civil unions. The next question becomes, what kind of civil union would satisfy that obligation? There is a lot of debate around that. Now, what the European Union have said is this: you have to have a civil union, but the civil union has a certain margin of appreciation. In other words, every country that is going to implement a civil union, it can have a civil union which is different from maybe what another country has, but it must be something that's meaningful. Must be something that is at least similar to marriage. And that's where the problem is. The bill that has been published, the problem is that it is marriage, as a lot of people have pointed out, Ruthana, they have established marriage except only in name. If marriage, same-sex marriage ever becomes instituted in the Cayman Islands, they don't have to amend much. They'll just have to go to these same laws they are amending and change domestic partnership to marriage, and you have marriage. If you want a graphic way of illustrating that, that is the way it would be. Now, in my view, they can do something that is not okay. Let me back up a little bit. Why did the bill fail? Why did the members of the Legislative Assembly say we won't have this? One, as I've said, they created marriage except only name. Then secondly, they used these terms like partnership, union, domestic. The Christian people don't want those terms because they say that marriage is a union for life between one man and one woman for the exclusion of all others. No, they don't want the word union used to this particular union. Partnership, they say, well, Adam and Eve were created as partners because Adam was created, and then the Lord said, I will give you a helpmeet to make you a helper. In other words, a partner. They don't want that name. Domestic, that means that it is a home, a legitimate home, like a Christian home. So we have to avoid those terms, and you will be surprised. Well, you wouldn't be surprised. Some people would be surprised to learn just how these little things make a difference.
Oh,
And then
all the difference in the world.
in the
All the
world,
difference in the world.
oh,
Trust.
yes, they do.
Mm-hmm.
And then initially they had flagged the legislation which they were going to amend, which I think is part of the reason it failed. But now they've dealt with that. They have now said exactly what will change in the health insurance law, evidence law, and all the laws and so on. So that is going to help. The last reason why it failed was some of the things were not well conceptualized. Like, for example, they told us that, well, this can be a partnership which is romantic. It can be romantic, like in My Boy Lollipop, for those who are old enough to remember the song, or it can be just purely purely a partnership. You remember it, yeah.
Yeah.
So when they said for you to get divorced, to show a 2 year separation and so on, again, you are saying that the way this partnership will be dissolved will be the same as a marriage. Again, some Christian people have got a problem with that, yeah? Because then you are equating this status to that of marriage. So the way in which to do it is to address those issues. First of all, we can still have a bill, first of all, which it must look more like a contract. This union, you must start from a concept of a contract, just like a regular contract, and then try to add to it maybe some elements which are similar to marriage. And if you do that, you will find that you will come out achieving about the same aim, but you will find that the procedures you go through and what it will look like, it will look more like a contract. And then, of course, you will deal with the terminology, you will deal with the dissolution of the partnership. In my view, the dissolution of the partnership should not be the same as that of marriage. You could possibly have a system where simply, if you want to end the partnership, you give notice, 6 months notice, I want to end the partnership. And if the other party doesn't object after you prove it has been served and so on, at the end of 6 months, you go to court and they give you the dissolution of the partnership. If the other side objects, they are kids, or they want to talk about property, then they can do that. To me, that's another area where a difference can be made between a marriage and a partnership. And if we approach it that way, you will find that what we might come up with might be something actually like a contract. A contract which says, this partnership, you will have my pension, my health insurance, and this and that. You will tick some boxes and so forth, and you will sign it. It will be witnessed, and you will deposit it with a particular public authority who will give you a certificate of the partnership. And you will find that if you can, like, make sure that the people who are solemnizing these relationships are different. The authority before which you file this document is not a marriage officer or the registrar of marriages, it's somebody else. It can be a court, it can be some other official and so on. Make sure that the regimes are totally separate. I think if we try something like that, there is a possibility that we might arrive at some kind of consensus regarding what kind of partnership will be acceptable to both sides.
And I know that right now the governor has chosen to present the bill and kind of want to look at the conversation. At this stage, are those kind of amendments and adjustments possible, do you think?
I didn't quite get everything you were saying.
No, I was saying that the governor has now gazetted the bill and it's open for a total of 21 days consultation. Some of those days have passed at this stage, right? Based, what you are proposing, just for the benefit of the public, do you believe that those type of amendments to this bill are possible at this stage?
It's a very good question, Ruthana, because the simple answer to it is that no. And I'll try to explain the reason. The first thing is, well, okay, let's give due thanks, due recognition of what the drafters have done. When I looked at the 11 bills which are related to the domestic partnership bill, there's a lot of work that has gone into them to try and amend them so that they can agree with the domestic partnership. There's a lot of work.
Okay.
But the answer really is it's not enough time. And I'll tell you why it's not enough time. One, usually when you put a bill out for consultation and you receive your comments, the comments usually are many. Sometimes some of them are hard to understand. Some are agreeing with others. Some are disagreeing with others. So you have to synthesize it and also gain a little bit of an idea of how many people are supporting one position or the other. That synthesizing alone takes a lot of time. And sometimes it means getting in touch to some of the people who have submitted to say, what did you really mean here? So sometimes even 21 days is not enough for that process alone. And then after that, then you need now the technical detail bill. Now, if the government were to accept this alternative way of doing this, as much as a lot of what is already there can be used, but because the concept will be different, there is a way in which it has to be pulled apart and reconstructed around a different concept. And that will take a lot of time. A lot of what they've already done will be useful. In fact, what I would suggest is rather than amend all those laws, again, which makes people feel, oh, this is equivalent to marriage, don't amend those laws. Leave them the way they are. Create a contract which will be like a regulation under the domestic partnership law, and put in there the rights that the parties will have in relation to all those issues, but put them in one law, the domestic partnership law. Don't amend those. Just say that once you enter into this partnership, this is what will apply, and created one, something that looks more like a contract, and it is separate from marriage. And then you have to deal with the dissolution. I don't think the dissolution should be on the same basis as marriage. Once you work that central concept, then there is a lot of like incidental things that will have to be done. And I think at the end of the day, there is a better chance that people might be able to agree to that. And sometimes you may find that when you do that and you put it out to public consultation, you'll find that maybe some people say, okay, we are happy, but just, and then you have to do some more. One of our plans is that there are very few people who oppose some form of partnership. Even the MLAs, I listened to the debate in the House. I listened to all the debate with Anna. I don't think there's a speaker I didn't listen to. I listened to the debate. They were saying, we are happy to do this, but not in this way. If
for a variety of reasons, but that generally was, I will agree with you that everyone had their own reasoning, but I think all of them in some way acknowledged that, okay, we may need to do this or we have to do this, but they took certain issues, whether it be religious or, over immigration issues and just wording on the bill, etc. But I would agree that most of them in some way, shape or form acknowledged that something has to be done, but they're dissatisfied with X, Y, or Z. Right?
Exactly. Exactly. And that is very significant in relation to the question that you asked Ruthana initially about what the governor is doing. If the people in the country have agreed that we want to do something but not in this way, then what is the rush that you want to do it in this particular way? Why don't you give enough time for people to consult? That's how I got together with a lot of my Caymanian friends. We discussed this back and forth on a lot of angles and so on. so that what has come out of this is not just my own idea, it is like more like our idea of how it might be dealt with. So in my view, there's no reason for the governor, for the for FCO to rush this. There is agreement on the objective to be achieved, but I think it is necessary to have a little more time for this idea to develop. Something else can be tried. And meanwhile, we still have time because the Privy Council case, I believe, is not coming up until February next year. So there is enough time to be able to do this. To continue to do it in this way, in my view, it divides the community. And after having divided the community, then people are now starting to ask about, well, should we really go? Should we go independent? I mean, how long is this going to go on?
Correct. And there are a lot of concerns that have arisen that have started to kind of prompt that discussion. But we are going out to our first break of our time together. It is now 5:32 p.m. And so we're going out. We will be gone for maybe about 2 minutes only and come right back into this conversation. I think that is a beautiful segue into some other questions that I have, because those conversations have come up as a direct result of the happenings over the last few weeks. Guys, I want you to keep it locked. I am joined by Mr. Bilka Samamba here until 6 o'clock this evening, talking about the domestic partnership bill, the governor's special powers, and what is now reignited discussions and questions around independence. So keep it locked for some more Straight Talk on Star 92.7.
Join the conversation. The phone lines are now open. 943-3700. You can also find us on Facebook or email us at straighttalkci@gmail.
Cayman National's online banking is still the best way for you to bank, and at Cayman National, you can access your banking when you need it. Enjoy safer, easier, and discounted banking from the comfort of your home or wherever you are. Manage your everyday banking needs, such as checking account activity, paying bills, transferring funds between accounts internally and domestically, and much more. Remember, we're stronger together through our efforts to keep the Cayman community healthy.
Reintroducing an old favorite and the only local family dining experience in Cayman. Champion House 2 has joined forces with the local eatery and is now open with a diverse food and adult beverage offering. Join us during the week for our buffet breakfast or lunch, or de-stress weekends on Fridays from 3 p.m. to 1 a.m. and Saturdays until 12 a.m. Music to keep you entertained, catering services to suit any budget. Let the local eatery at Champion House 2 cater to you by calling 916-5736 or 329-5550, or place your order via Island Grub or the Let's Eat app today.
Every Wednesday and Thursday, all Rubis stations are rolling back the price on all fuel purchases by 20 cents. Every customer will save 20 cents on every gallon of fuel purchased on Wednesday and Thursday. Every customer. Only at Rubis.
Roll back.
Only participating Rubik service station.
There are few things in Cayman that are as iconic as the 2 for $6 deal at Burger King, with the possible exception of our wonderful marine life. Well, possible exception no more. A Big Fish sandwich has just joined the other stars of 2 for $6. You heard right. Choose from the iconic Whopper, Crispy Chicken Sandwich, Spicy Crispy Chicken Sandwich, and now the Big Fish. And get 2 sandwiches for just $6. Hurry, for a limited time only. Available at Burger King 7 Mile Beach, Waterfront, Walkers Road, and Red Bay.
Welcome back to Straight Talk with Ruth Anna on Star 927.
We are back, folks, and you are tuned into Straight Talk, brought to you exclusively by Star 92.7 Premium Radio. I am your host, Ruth Anna Young, joined this afternoon by Ms. Bilka Samamba. We are discussing the domestic partnership bill, conversations around independence, and the governor's special powers. Obviously, a very loaded conversation this afternoon, but one where I feel that, as always, Mr. Bilka lends a very stable and knowledgeable viewpoint to our conversation to help us as laymen understand really what exists and doesn't exist in law and what are the possibilities for us as a community. 943-3700 is the line in studio. You can also WhatsApp me at 324-1565, or you can email me at straighttalkci@gmail.com. And so I had a comment come in from a listener who says, I agree it's very unfair to be said that the Legislative Assembly is unwilling to pass the bill. I think what she's alluding to, Mr. Mamba, is what mentioned in that in one way, shape, or form, they all said, we acknowledge that we need to put something in place, but as you say, not like this, right? And so they're I guess echoing your comments, acknowledging that they feel that it's an unfair statement about the Legislative Assembly to say that they were unwilling to, versus just acknowledging that many of them had a variety of concerns. We saw questions come up about things like what it meant for the immigration law, and things like marriages of convenience, what they perceived to be loopholes as it existed, and some of them were religious concerns and otherwise, but the listener agreed with your commentary around that is what I gather from their comment, right? And so just as we were going out to the break, you started to segue into the questions that now arise because people have expressed concerns about the fact that our legislators could go into our Legislative Assembly, debate a bill, cast their votes, the bill is defeated, and we are now faced with the governor exercising powers within our constitution that allow them to basically say, okay, you voted, but we are going to, that is unacceptable, the outcome is unacceptable, and so we're going to use these powers to make some changes. So that is what is reigniting this discussion around fears of, well, if he can do it with this, then what stops him, her, whoever the governor is at any point in our history from doing with anything else that they want to, right? Now, I would first ask you, what are some of the conversations or comments that are coming forward to you around the discussion about independence, if any?
Well, there's a lot actually from different angles. By the way, that listener, the one who called in, that is what I've been hearing in the community. That why force this on people? And just before I directly answer your question, see, I was very disappointed with some of the debate in the House, which was saying that, well, we know what the people want, but sometimes when you are a leader, you have to lead and do something different. I couldn't understand that. I thought leadership is being able to listen to people, to what they say. And I remember a number of MLAs saying, look, I think that the Honorable Kenneth Bryan actually did a poll. He did some little slips to ask people the questions. And his poll, like on some questions, about 80% of his people didn't want it. That has to mean something. You can't just say, well, because we are leaders, we value your opinion if your opinion is that we should be elected. But when you give us another opinion which says we don't want you to vote for this, that opinion is not important. We can ignore it in the name of leadership. I think that that is a problem there. But that is something I think also the British government has to look at, because they have to understand that in a small community particularly, you have to be careful. You can't push it too hard, because once you achieve the certain cleavage in it, it can be a problem. But to talk about this independence issue, a lot of people have talked about it. The way you ask your question, Rustana, just it makes it very easy for me to answer it, because how many things, for example, have we had to fight the British government about in the last about 3 years? how many?
Oh dear.
How many?
There have been several. That some fights are still continuing.
Exactly. Some of them are not quite, they've subsided, but they are still to come.
Yes.
If you reach back into the past, there was the issue of the death penalty. Although that one, ultimately, the society was moving in a different direction. They made homosexual acts lawful. That was a bit of a controversy. Then there was the one about trying to make the UK people vote, like give them a right to vote in the Cayman Islands. For the first time since I came to Cayman, 2003 August, for the first time, I heard Caymanians talk about maybe at some point we need to go independent if people in the UK will come here and vote. And I remember some of the people saying, let's put together a contingency program so that in case they do this, then we can go to independence. And then there's the beneficial ownership and now same-sex marriage. And I think the question that has to be asked is, how long are we going to have to fight these fights? There are some people who are saying, well, this is not the end. In 2 to 3 years, there will be something else, or maybe sooner, and so on. And they may also get to a point and say, look, you are part of us. Our standards which we apply in our community, we want to apply them in yours because you are part of us. But why do we have to fight with you all the time? You know, if you want independence, you have independence. One of my friends, what he loves to say is, he says, look, one day the British will just come and put a lighter under our seat and we'll have to jump. And if we are not ready, it will be a problem.
I've heard those.
There must be no assumption, in my view. You've heard that, yeah? Yes.
Yeah,
because
I have
it
heard
is
those.
out there in the community. People must not exactly, because people must not assume that we can have this so long as we want it. There will be a time when they will say, well, the British will say, we don't want to give it to you. So it is important to, I think, educate people on independence. A lot of leaders in the community have said that. Just like we've said, you can't force same-sex partnership on the community. At the same time, you don't want to force independence on the community either. People can make decisions if you give them the information and the education. For example, I point to a case of St. Kitts and Nevis. St. Kitts and Nevis is a small country, 52,000 people, poorer than the Cayman Islands, but it is independent and it even conducts its own foreign affairs. It's got about 12 embassies and high commissions in New York, in Washington, in the EU, in London, of course, and they run their affairs. You think that Cayman cannot have 12 embassies somewhere to run its affairs? There are also other examples. You know, in the Russian Federation, when the Soviet Union broke up, some of those independent countries had their foreign relations, like visas and that kind of thing. They were being done by Russia, but they were independent countries. There are all these options. I was listening to Daniel Arendt the other time talking about, I think it's a small Tuvalu or some island like that, which has got associated status with the UK.
Correct.
And to me, people just have to understand that independence is not necessarily a bad thing. Mr. Roy Borden, a person I respect a lot, he said one time, he said, look, Singapore is an independent country, and its history is very similar to Cayman. They kicked it out of Malaysia. It was a backwater, and it built an economy which is one of the best in the world. So things are all possible. Being an African, let me slip in two things. In Zimbabwe, it was said one time that if Zimbabwe becomes independent, it will go down. It never went down for about 20 years until their president started going crazy. But that was a different problem. People said about South Africa that, well, if the majority are going to rule in South Africa, there will be capital flight. No. There was a capital flight during the struggle for democracy. After promises were made to people that we will continue this system the way it is, capital flight stopped. And you won't believe it, Ruthana, today, by proportion of the population, the people who are leaving South Africa more than anybody else is the black people, not the white people. Okay? By proportion of the population. All I'm trying to say is you can get ready for these things. You can assure people that things are not going to change. And ultimately, that is something that you might want to consider. One last very important point. Are you about to go to break?
I do have a caller on the line. So I want to give
just one very short point.
Yes.
There's somebody who was saying on a radio show yesterday, saying, let us have independence maybe in 25 years. But do you know whether in 25 years, what the demographics in Cayman will be? the chances are that the demographics in Cayman will be mostly people from Britain, from the US, and from Canada, because they are the ones who can afford to get status and so on. I'm not condemning them. You know, one of the people who sponsored me to be called to the bar is from one of those countries. But those people won't want to be independent. At that point, you might not be able to get the political consensus to be independent. That happened with the Falklands, with Gibraltar. The British population there grew so much that when they went to referendum to say, do you want to be independent or to stay with Britain? They said, we want to stay with Britain. Why? Because the population had been overtaken. I think you should take your call.
Yes. Welcome to Straight Talk. What's in your mind today?
Good afternoon to you, ma'am.
Good afternoon, Taxman.
Good
How are you
afternoon
doing?
to the gentleman here also. I think many times whenever I mention or talk about independence for Caymanians, that we might get it crossed up with what I'm trying to tell the people. When Mr. Ormond Panton, Jim Barton, suggested that a more autonomous situation was self-rule, self-government, and so forth, which we know all about, and dig into the history and read it up, they should do this. Young people are talking all this about this now. We Caymanians were a majority. I'm talking about generational Caymanians. We keep saying we were the we we're talking about now. It's a very, very different Cayman. Just as the gentleman said, the esteemed lawyer there, it is where the majority may be. Well, what has happened here right now is that the power and the control and the money lies in the hands of not Caymanians, and we know that for several years now. They might not want political independence because that's what we're talking about for us. And most countries who have an embassy are countries that export something. It's for exporting, because I did that type of work, embassy work, for those situations. I know a little bit about it. No one needs to try to tell me about that. It's usually for countries that export to those countries why you need that certificates of doing and so forth. The reality is that Cayman, we would have to push our constitution forward, number one. You'd have to write a new constitution. The constitution we have now is not a constitution for an independent country at all. It's for a colonial country. It's for a colony. And we'd have to let the people know that we have to move it forward, that you would have to get, as the attempt was made by the Premier and Mr. Ezra Miller and Mr. Albert Sakou, and the governor went up with that. And they got an agreement to move forward quite a bit. And the governor agreed to it and was happy about it. He talked about it when he came back. I know that has more or less kind of fallen apart for a while now, but that's not what I'm talking about. Is prepare the status of the people for an independent situation. You have to move the constitution forward to a situation where you almost have control of the political arm, and you wouldn't be, the governor wouldn't have that oversight as much. That would take quite a while in our situation right now, with as where we are, because you're a minority. If you held a referendum today for independence, you might be surprised. It might come out that no, the answer might be no, because of the situation of how the population is right now. But
ask you, Taxman.
Anyway, what I'm saying is you definitely have to move the constitution forward, and then you can talk about and let the people know what the consequences are of independence. That's why I mentioned about Mr. Jim Barton with what he thought about. He knew the situation with the United States. That's why I talked about what his idea was to alleviate that problem was a Commonwealth state. And one of the omniscient five called in and said that I was talking about a colony. Puerto Rico is not a colony of the United States at all, by no means. It's not a colony. It's a Commonwealth state. And I won't bother to define the differences with that on a colony. But I didn't suggest that that's the way forward for us. I was just showing you that we have thought about the importance of that immediately, that what we have to maintain that relationship with the United States. If we go independent, we have to make sure that we have that close relationship. I don't know how we would do it because we now have the privilege of the waiver. I don't know how, and that's why I talked about that. That's very important. We'd have to explain that to the people, that we could lose that privilege that we're used to from 1948. Those things are unique to us, and many other colonies don't have that situation. Many countries, independent countries, don't have that privilege. That's what I talked about. Mention those kind of things, not the cons only, or the pros only. But
a full balanced.
Have a wonderful evening.
Thank you so much, Taxman. Thank you. And Philippa, I will turn it over to you. Certainly, the Taxman always has an abundance of insight as well. Any thoughts on your end from some of the things that he said?
Well, I learn from people like that all the time because they give you these perspectives, and sometimes you just learn and you keep that knowledge, or sometimes it provokes you into a next thought. I think one of the number of things he has emphasized, the last caller, a number of things. One of them is that insecurity that comes with independence. You see, he's talking about how we can maintain a certain relationship with the United States because that's a big brother. In fact, there's more connection in a sense with the United States than even with the UK. So there's that feeling that people justifiably feel that independence could give could leave Cayman very vulnerable. All those things have to be dealt with, but they have to be dealt with in a practical way. There are studies which can be done, for example, to say, okay, is there likely to be capital flight? You can get political economists, financial people, and so on, who can do a projection. They used to do this in the EU, for example, when they were moving from the European Economic Community and the other two communities, when they wanted to now have the EU and combine all the three communities. They did studies, like 5-10-year studies, to put figures to certain things so that they could know how it would be done. I think Cayman has got to a point where it's got nothing to lose, should start doing that now, rather than saying, well, you see, I think it should come at some point. It should start doing that now and see how the people are responding and make decisions as it goes along. At the moment, I think that's an issue you can't ignore.
Agreed. And since we're about 5 minutes from the tail end of the show, I want to also mention something earlier. When I asked you in relation to, as it is right now, the things that making the amendments are possible, and you spoke to the time, it's not possible because of time frame and all the how involved that process is. If you could offer your opinion how could it still be possible for us? What would have to happen based on your knowledge of the process, procedure, and where we're at currently? Is there any way that could still be possible to be able to go back and maybe I don't know what the legal and proper terms of these things are, but to kind of press a reverse button of sort, or how it would have to happen procedurally to allow us the possibility of really having a period of public consultation and considering amendments and revisions, potentially like what you've suggested, or is that just not something that's could be on the table at this point?
Okay, you broke off a little bit, but you are talking about the constitution, the partnership bill, right?
Correct. Yes.
Rather than, about the bill, because I was getting. I really think that what the governor should do now is suspend this procedure suspend it because it has divided the country, as I say, and I think it will make Caymanians question the whole relationship of the UK. And I think if he can bring together a different group of people, to bring them together and try to develop these ideas some more. Like I said, it's not only me who developed these ideas. I was in a group of people. We are happy to be able to assist just to discuss it and see if there is a way in which certain key ideas can be accepted by both sides without having to draft anything yet. A small working group to put together some people to say, well, you sit down together and see what you can agree on. For me, what I'm hoping for, I've been part of this community since 2003. I would hope that there's a bill which comes out, it is agreed, and when it is agreed, the people from Colors Cayman, the people from the Ministers Association, the members of the government and the opposition and other people in the community can maybe go and stand outside the government administration building when the bill is being assembled and hold hands to say we have now agreed, we have resolved it. For me, emotionally, that's what I hope that can happen. I'm a lawyer, I shouldn't be emotional. Okay.
Yeah, but the thought of that gave me goosebumps actually, because it is such a divisive conversation in our community, but with enough direction and effort and a proper approach to it, we could come out on the other end on that side, right? Where something is produced that most reasonable people can be to some degree in agreement on. And the definition of marriage can still be protected, and the rights of same-sex couples can be protected, and that Cayman culture can be protected. That is possible, but it certainly requires us to put forth some more effort. But final thoughts from you before we close out the show.
Well, the only final thought is just to thank you for inviting me. I know we should have done it a little earlier, but I'm really grateful. I hope that we've done something with your help to add something to the conversation. I hope we can do it again in due course, but really thanks very much to you and to your viewers together with all your callers. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Bilika, and I appreciate you for being a part of this conversation and always being so willing to just share your knowledge and share your expertise and try to help create solutions. I think that's something I appreciate so much about you, and every time I've heard you speak, it is very solution-centric and a desire to help move things forward in a positive way. So we will certainly do this again, and thank you for lending your voice to this conversation. Guys, we're about to turn the dial to 6 o'clock. Thank you all for listening. Thank you to the callers and those who sent messages as well. It's Thursday, which means I'll be back on air on Monday. Of course, Mondays for the month of August is Open Mic Monday. For those of you still on the roadways, please drive safe. I love you all, and thank you for tuning in each and every Monday to Thursday for Straight Talk on Star 92.7.
Let's get to the point. More Straight Talk to come on Star 927. Connect to the culture.